On da, я вот хотел, чтобы он позвонил, уточнил дату.
I think we can start, and if people are not here in front of their computers, I'm pretty sure that when they hear you talking, they will come back and will join us. So, because you know, I'm looking at the clock and I see that we have to go further. So I think we should start.
No problem. Alrighty. Hey, welcome back. If you're not back now, I'm thinking you will be, like Arta says, shortly. So just carrying on with traffic crash reporting. Like I mentioned, for New Zealand, it drives policing activity, it drives maintenance, it drives strategy. So it's an excellent source of information for roading authorities, for government, for enforcement in general. It has some weaknesses. Because of the volume of crashes, sometimes the attention to detail isn't quite as good as it should be. Oftentimes, some agencies aren't able to share the information they've captured as part of their report. So they can't share vital information with other people or partners in the road safety partnership to bring about safety improvements. There may be differences in the standard and formatting of reports across the country. Different cities may use different forms or different processes. And there's sometimes a disconnect between police and the information that they can receive from hospitals or health industry. A lot of that comes down to patient confidentiality. But it's important to understand what sort of injuries are occurring and where they are occurring as part of that information package. Often there's an underreporting from vulnerable road users. So people falling off a bike, in New Zealand, that doesn't classify as a road crash. It's not a motor vehicle. We only report on motor vehicle crashes. So we do miss a lot of that sort of event. Although they are causing injuries, they are happening on a road, and they're a group that we need to be careful for, the vulnerable road users. There are times when we simply don't know about them, don't report them. So,
Mark,
can
I jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you are changing a bit the topic, and I would like to add one experience from my duty while being a police officer, because at the end of my service, I was responsible also for crash data. And we knew, of course, that precise data is important. So we introduced the internal regulation that every police officer is obliged to put GPS coordinates in the crash report to be precise. And we started very proudly that everything now will be perfect. And suddenly it turned out that it's not perfect, because the weakest point in the chain is human beings. And putting GPS coordinates, and there are a lot of numbers, and changing even one number in the coordinates, it means that the place will be somewhere else. And when we started checking the coordinates, it turned out that some accidents were in our neighbor countries, in Latvia, on the Baltic Sea. So we thought, what's wrong? We invented such a perfect solution, and then something is wrong. And yeah, we pointed that the weakest point is human beings. So nowadays I know that from my colleagues, because I'm not in the service anymore, that they are obliged to use the phones. Actually, they have the special devices, and whenever being on the crash scene, they have to take download, upload the coordinates from the device, and then we know that the coordinates are correct. So even sometimes when you want to improve something, you have to think it over, because we thought from the beginning that it will be perfect solution, but suddenly it turned out for a while, at least, that it wasn't so perfect. So yeah, just a kind of example from real life. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for that. We're the same here. The police now have a traffic crash app on their phone, so everything is done electronically and it automatically does the GPS. Solves that problem. Yeah, lots of numbers. One, like you say, get one wrong, you just change the country. For us, we have a long way to go to another country, so we'll have crashes in the middle of the ocean. So yeah. Just a quick bit on injuries, definitions. And this is basically the international definition for your injury types. So a fatal injury, fatal casualty, is a death resulting from injuries sustained in the crash within 30 days of that crash happening. So 1st of January, I have a crash, I'm badly injured. If I die on the 30th, we still call that a fatal crash and a fatal injury from the crash. If it happens on the 31st or the 1st of February, no. It's just a statistical term, but that 30 days is important. Serious injury, and this is where it gets a little bit different. Fractures, concussions, severe cuts, as in cuts that require stitching, or any other injury requiring medical intervention, attention, or a stay in hospital. And a minor injury is one that's not serious, but requires first aid. So it may be a plaster or an ice pack on a bruise, something like that. Causes discomfort or pain, but doesn't require going to hospital or any serious treatment. Those are the general definitions for injuries. And from that, you have the definition of a crash. A serious crash is a crash that has a serious injury involved. A fatal crash has a fatal injury involved. And a minor crash, minor injury. And of course, you have the non-injury where no one is injured at all, which does happen. And that's a non-injury crash.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Just a little bit more on reporting rates. We've talked about this a fair bit, so I won't spend too much time on it. But some of the reasons that have been discovered for the difference in the real crash rate versus what is statistically recorded. And there's a list there. Sometimes the people don't want to report it, don't want the police involved in any way. The driver, the at fault or culpable driver, avoids reporting it because he may have been drunk or didn't have a license, something like that. Some reason he doesn't want to go to police to avoid a prosecution. And sometimes police simply can't get to the crashes. The staff are all busy in other tasks, or the crash is so far away, it's not practical to attend. And there's a few other reasons in there as well, but we've talked about those already. But just be aware that around the world, there is a difference between the actual crash picture and what is reported. Okay, again, talking about injuries, just remember those definitions: fatal, serious, minor, and no injury. This here's an example from a New Zealand handwritten crash report. They're now all electronic, but we used to use a written report. And we've got their minor injuries: bruising and a minor cut. So again, nice little succinct one. Up here, we have fractures, we have concussion, admitted into the hospital because of the fractures, serious injury. And this one here, 8 stitches required, broken ribs, again, serious. So just have a good look at your injuries. If there's any fractures, anything requiring some treatment or a stay in hospital, serious injury. That's just repeating what I said before. We'll skip that. Just remember, fatal injuries, fatal crash. The injury determines the type of crash from a statistical point of view. Some little bits here just on injury definitions, and the crash relationship. So these are sort of topics to make sure that your crash report captures the information. So for statistics and for follow-up, you need a unique way to identify that crash, so a unique file number. We need to know the date, time, the county, the municipality, the city, the town that the crash happened in, the exact location, the crash type. So was it a head-on crash? Was it a T-bone crash? Someone failed to give way and got hit in the side? Was it a run-off road crash? What was the weather conditions? What were the lighting conditions? And what was the crash severity? So fatal, serious, minor, none. On the road, just description of the road. What type of road is it? Is it a rural state highway? Is it a urban residential street? Is it a city street in the downtown city? What's the functional class? So is it a commuter street? Is it a freight, predominantly a freight transporting route? What's the road used for? Other information to catch: speed limit, any obstacles in the road, like is there something wrong? Is there a large pothole that people are having to drive around to avoid? What's the surface? Is it tar seal? Is it concrete? Is it gravel or dirt? And what condition is it in? If it's an intersection, what sort of control? Stop signs, traffic signals, that sort of things. That's describing the scene environment. And again, for the vehicle, registration number or license plate number, the type of vehicle, the make, the model, the year, the vehicle special function. Is it a freight delivery truck? Is it a concrete truck? Is it some sort of, what's the vehicle's primary design? And the vehicle maneuver, what was the driver trying to do when the crash happened? And again, the good old basic details around the people. So the person, who is the person? Where in the vehicle was the person sitting? Which vehicle was the person in? Date of birth, gender, what type of road user? Are they a motorcyclist? Are they a passenger? Are they a driver? And things like that. So just a list of the sort of information that should be captured in a good crash report. When you gather lots of this information, you start seeing your black spots or your clusters emerge and the factors within them. So do we have a problem with unlicensed drivers? Do we have a problem with people exceeding the speed limit? All of those things listed in that table could basically be described as factors in the crash event, so in that chain of events. Okay, causation. This is the key. What caused the crash to happen? There's a lot of ways to capture and determine causation, and through this, the next 2.5 days, we will spend a lot of time exploring evidence at the road, evidence from vehicles, to start determining some of these factors. But basic things like a description of the crash and a scene diagram is a very powerful way of capturing information and starting to show you what is happening. Sobriety, alcohol and drugs, how fast was the vehicle going? What sort of offences, if any, were committed? Who was at fault? Do we intend to prosecute? And what sort of action can we take to stop the crash happening again? Is there something we can do in the meantime? Be it more enforcement, we get the road construction people to come out and fix the pothole so people don't drive onto the wrong side to miss it. It's that sort of information that we're capturing at the scene. What have we got here? Another picture to come. Location, GPS is ideal. As Arthur says, if you're going to use GPS, you have to be very careful writing down the coordinates. They are long numbers, and they're an ideal way for a person to make a mistake by missing out a number. So if you can capture it electronically off your phone or something like that, perfect. Otherwise, things like mile markers beside the road, or distance in meters from a landmark. So say there's an intersection and the crash happened 350 meters north of the intersection. use that method to describe the location. What we need to do is get the location captured accurately. So when we put the pin in our map, it's in the right spot. And then we can start seeing our clusters. So good, accurate information as to crash location is critical. Alrighty, that's sort of the policy bit and a little bit of how it drives activity at the crash scene. So what we're going to do now is get into crash investigation and reporting proper. So a little list of topics we want to talk about before we start talking about evidence itself. Question 1, why do we attend road traffic crashes? I gave a hint to this before. The idea and aim of traffic law enforcement is to reduce serious crashes and the deaths and injuries they cause. I'll put it simply, crash prevention. Problem solving. If we want to solve a problem, we have to understand what the problem is. So to truly improve road safety, we need to understand how and why crashes are happening so we can address them. And that is why this crash investigation work is so important. We've talked a little bit about the importance of accurate reporting, because it's and the information that you generate in your reports and how it's used. Again, just like that risk targeting, evidence-led policing, it also informs construction, road safety improvements. It can shape policy and law. So from good quality crash reporting, there may be evidence there that the speed limit on a certain road is too high. So there's evidence there from the crashes to support a reduction in speed limit. That sort of thing is where your crash reporting comes in. It's about using the information of what's happened to make changes to change the situation and improve road safety. Again, accuracy, I know I'm repeating myself, but the attention to detail, accurately recording locations, all of the evidence available at a scene, the details of people and vehicles involved is critical. Some of the other stuff too, like whereabouts was the sun at the time of the crash? It may be it's shining straight into the driver's face. Was there anything on the road? Was there a diesel fuel spill? Or was the road just very, very wet? Things like that are factors. And if there's a problem with a road becoming extremely slippery in the wet, maybe new surface can be put on it. So we use that information to help persuade the engineers to do some work. It's all comes down to good quality information and good accurate information. There's a bit of a difference though when we talk about, sorry, I've skipped too far ahead. Now we're back on track. Difference between crash reporting and crash investigating. Reporting is typically filling in a crash report form. So it captures the basic information. It's all vital, important information, but it usually covers who was involved, what happened, where did it happen, when did it happen, and a little bit of how. The how can be limited to driver of vehicle 1 exceeding the speed limit. Driver of vehicle 1 failed to stop for red traffic light, that sort of thing. Investigation takes it to another level and asks why the crash happened. Why did the driver not stop for the red light? Was there something blocking his view of it? Was there a problem with his eyesight? It makes you ask the next questions to dig a little bit deeper. It takes more time than simply filling out a report form, because you have to start thinking about that why question. Why? Why did that happen? Why did the car not stop? Are its brakes working? Is there a problem with it? That sort of question starts forming in your mind. And what you're doing there is you're getting into investigation rather than simply reporting. The reason for the investigation: determine causative factors. So remember that causative factor is something that caused or contributed to the crash. It's one of those links in the chain, in that chain of events. So the little diagram we have below there, get my laser going. The environment, the road and roadsides, what part did that have to play in the crash? Was there something wrong with the road surface? Was there something wrong with the alignment? Like, was a corner off camber, so as you drive around it, it tends to make you fall to the outside of the road? The vehicle, was there some mechanical fault with the vehicle? It shouldn't have been on the road. It had a problem with its steering, a problem with its brakes. The road users, did the driver have a license? Did he know the law? Was he complying? Or was he breaking the law? Was he sober? Same can be asked of people, other people involved, cyclists, pedestrians. Why did the cyclist not see the car? Why did the pedestrian step out in front of the car? We're thinking about these areas for possible causes to the crash. And the last one there is speed. What was the speed of the vehicle, and how did that influence the outcome of the crash? Was the speed so high that the crash became unsurvivable? It generated so much impact force. Was the speed limit appropriate for the environment? Things like that. It's those 4 key areas that you'll recognize from that safe system model that we consider when we're looking for causative factors, the things that may have caused or contributed to the crash. And a little example here. This is an example for a crash that happens on a corner. So some of the things we may ask, and this isn't all of them, it's just some examples, but the vehicle brakes are in poor condition, which means maybe the driver couldn't slow down to a good speed for the corner. There's no signs advising the driver of the corner ahead. So the driver's carried on driving at speed and been caught out by going too fast for the corner. The road surface may have been slippery, so the driver simply couldn't make it around the corner because of the slippery surface. Maybe the driver was drunk. Because he's drunk, he's not going to make good decisions. His reactions are going to be slow. It could be a primary cause. Did the vehicle have smooth tyres? The tread was worn out. This happened on a rainy day. He has no grip, just like a slippery road surface, slips off the road. And was he going too fast? These things here are questions that we start to ask ourselves when we're thinking about what caused this crash, the why questions. So it gives you an idea of the step up from simply reporting, simply filling in the boxes. Now we go that little bit further. In terms of crash investigation, there's different levels, and we generally talk about 5 levels of investigation. Not every crash you attend requires full investigation. Some are very simple, particularly non-injury, minor, low speed, negligible damage, don't require a whole lot of work. But as a guide, remember the injury criteria. And for fatal and serious injuries, which is where the strategic focus is to reduce them, they deserve the attention of a full and thorough investigation. The others, not so much, but still detailed reporting. So we capture the fact that the crash happened and the circumstances around it. And just a little hint there, if you're attending what appears to be a relatively minor crash, but it involves very young or elderly victims, treat it like a serious injury crash. My experience and that of investigators around the world is that these age groups, the very young or the very old, are particularly vulnerable, and a crash that may be easily survived by a fit young person can take the life of those vulnerable people. So you've got one chance to get your scene evidence. And in this case, where you've got young or old, take the time, gather the evidence. And if 20 days down the track, one of them dies, you have enough information to complete a fatal level investigation. Okay, just a little bit on the influences. So safe and reliable transport, critical to your economy. Trucks delivering freight, they need reliable open roads so they can get their freight from the depot to the shops and so forth. Crashes happen, blocks the network, holds up the freight, which has an impact on the economy. People aren't receiving the goods they want on time, and it has that roll-on effect. And think about the purpose of roads. So you have your large intercity highways designed to allow freight and people to move between the cities efficiently. Roads to the ports, ideally, designed primarily to allow goods to be taken to ports for shipping around the world. The type of road will direct the type of transport. So those roads to the ports maybe have a large concentration of trucks and large vehicles carrying freight. Bit different to a residential street, which is just a street servicing where people live. There you'll tend to have family cars, but you may also have children playing on the road, using it as a playground. So it's another potential risk area. Just think about what is the primary use of the road, how can that influence the vehicles using it, and what sort of risks does it introduce to the other road users. It's just part of what we would look at as part of an investigation. Quick little bit on transport system. If we think of a transport system, there's basically three properties. The physical properties, which is the road itself, the environment it travels through. We have the users, which is the drivers, the cyclists, the pedestrians, all the people who use that piece of road as part of their daily lives. And the controlling elements, that's the laws that govern how you should use the road. It's the speed limits. It may be the restrictions on the type of vehicles that can use the road. It's what controls that road network from the type of road to the way drivers should behave when using it. And we think about these areas when we're conducting a crash investigation also. I'll come and change. And also just remember, the SAFE system sits behind all of this. Our causative factors, focusing on these four areas. Some of the information around the side gives you clues like education information, licensing and registration. That's about letting vehicles and people access the transport system, the road system. We have our rules in place. The reports that we do based on these four pillars form our data research and evaluation information. So it's all linked together in one big system. And what we've got here. Okay, a little bit about you, the investigator. I think the biggest skill you have is being inquisitive. Don't accept at face value everything you see. So ask questions, ask why is this how it is? What could have happened? You're quite prepared to ask yourself the question. So it then drives your activity when you're investigating. You start looking for information. By asking the questions to yourself, it gets you looking at the evidence to make sure that you examine all the available evidence at a scene, capture it, record it, and describe it in your follow-up report. A little bit on preparation. There's an old saying in New Zealand in the fire brigade, to fight the fire, you have to get to the fire first. And it's exactly the same when attending a crash. There's instinct to, when you receive the call, to turn on your flashing lights and drive as fast as you can to get to the scene. We encourage getting there promptly. You've got to get there safely. There's absolutely no help to anyone if you yourself crash on the way to a crash, attend a crash. So drive quickly but safely. On your way to the scene, have a think about what other resources you may need. You're going to an injury crash involving a truck and a car. You're going to need an ambulance. You're going to need some tow trucks, some recovery vehicles capable of moving a truck. What else do you need? You might need other staff to help with traffic control. So start thinking about these things and get them on the way to the scene as well, so that you don't arrive and have to manage the entire scene and all of the injuries by yourself. You've already got people coming to help you out. Because the scenes, particularly the serious crash scene, can be quite chaotic. You have victims to manage, you have vehicles to manage, you have traffic to manage. You may have other hazards like leaking fuel from the vehicles. You may have power lines that have been knocked down. There's all sorts to manage to make the scene safe to work in. So the more people you have there helping you, the easier and safer your task will be. Okay, that sort of ends the theory part around the strategy and the reasons for crash investigation. What I want to do now is actually move in to talking about the evidence itself. Identifying evidence on the road, what it all means, and how to capture and record it. So we're moving now into the more practical frontline scene attendance parts of the training. Before we do that, are there any questions for Arthur and I to perhaps answer before we move on? And I've got to open a new presentation.
Yeah, just while you are opening the presentation, just I want to add that probably now the questions will appear since you are starting the most practical part of this training. That part and the rest of the training is the part where Mark is feeling like fish in the water. So this is that part he likes the most. So enjoy the training.
Awesome. Just while I find the presentation, take a 2-minute stretch, do a bit of stretching, top up your coffee if you want, and I'll get the presentation rolling. I'm just going to dig it out. It's not where I thought it was, unfortunately. Open.
Урматтуу коллегалар, жакшы элесиңерби? Урматтуу коллегалар, жакшы элесиңерби?
I think he is asking if everything is okay.
He's
asking his colleagues.
Ah, good.
Жакшы, азыр кичине эс ала тургула деп атпайбы? Мен бир көнүгүүнү айтайын, ошону мени туурап жазагын. Колуңар могу башыңар чарчап кетти да. Кийинки информация жакшы кириш үчүн азыр бир көнүгүүнү айтам, тиги тапкы жакта, ошону жазагыла, урматтуу кесиптештер. Тиги Марк досума да айтып койгула. Ким которгонду билсе. Принципе, аны которуштун эле кереги жок. Мени
They're talking among themselves probably about questions.
All good. What I need.
Буттарыбыз тап. Жаңы жыл келди, жаш балбан. Кайраттанган, шаттанган. Otro gayrat nemeteyim.
Now,
Mark, do you need any help?
I'm just going to try and figure out how to share the screen again now. Right.
Уважаемые участники, если у вас есть вопросы, задавайте, или вы можете...
And then reminds if they have any questions or comments, please ask. Can we ask questions? Yes, sure, you can. Well, there is another PPT is shared on the screen. Some of us were a bit late, therefore we just wanted to exchange some phrases with each other.
Yep. All good. No problem. So are we good to carry on?
Yeah, probably we can, yeah.
Yep, okay. I will carry on. Where are we? Okay. Identifying and collecting road crash evidence. I've just got to get my English version caught up. So we're talking now about road evidence. Again, this is the operational part, what we'll see at a crash scene and what to do with what we see. You've heard me talking about crashes being violent events. Huge forces are involved in traffic crashes, and because of the forces involved, they will leave marks on the road surface. So I like to call it the fingerprint of a crash. Every crash leaves its fingerprint. And as we know, sometimes fingerprints are very clear, sometimes they're not quite so clear. So we're going to spend some time identifying all the different types of fingerprints, the types of marks, and what they actually mean. So some of your marks can be tire marks, there can be scrape marks, gouges, a thing called spatter, and other marks. So all of these terms probably sound a little bit strange, but we're going to take our time and go through them so you understand exactly what they are and exactly what causes them. It's important to be able to identify the different types of marks. That identification and understanding of what causes them is foundation to a robust crash investigation. It can tell you the whole story of a crash without the need to talk to a witness. So we're using physical evidence to explain how and why the crash happened. The good thing with physical evidence, it doesn't lie. The problem with physical evidence is the interpretation of what you see. Hence us spending a fair bit of time now working through that. So a question there. Think about a traffic crash. What do you expect to see on the road? And I am going to show you a picture. You will see a lot of photographs of this crash because it has lots of different types of physical evidence that all has significant meaning to understanding the crash itself. This is a crash that I attended, it's nearly 10 years ago now, on the main highway just north of the city of Wellington where I live. It involves this silver vehicle here that was travelling, that's south, heading into the screen was travelling south, and it collided with this large truck and trailer that was heading north. So a two-way road, 80 km/h speed limit, and the only thing separating traffic was these two painted yellow lines. In New Zealand, those lines mean keep left, no overtaking. So it's not a physical barrier, it's a legal barrier. So to be legal, you have to stay in your lane here. You can't cross that. In this case, the silver car actually crossed the centre line into the front of this truck. And in New Zealand, we have a very bad suicide rate. And this crash was actually a suicide. The driver of that car deliberately drove into the oncoming truck. He was in trouble with police. He was going through a very nasty divorce with his wife and had a lot on his mind and decided the best way to solve his problem was to take his own life. So he did it using a car and involving an innocent oncoming truck driver. But if we have a look at the scene, it's a mess. We have a badly damaged vehicle. We have pieces of the vehicle on the road. We have marks on the road, these white ones, these black ones. We have debris everywhere. So It looks a bit like a small bomb blast. The car has been destroyed, and this is what we're confronted with when we get there. And we have to go and sift through that evidence and try and determine what it is, what caused it, and what does it mean. So another example of crash evidence. Overhead view, we have here marks on the road. We have debris from in the vehicle. That looks like compact disc CDs. We have a badly damaged vehicle here and another badly damaged one there. Again, CDs on the road, so lots of debris, dirt and things spread about the road. Yet another scene. Looking at this one, we have tyre marks on the road. We have some sort of spray of oil or something from one of the vehicles. And again, our damaged vehicles. We've got debris scattered here. So in terms of evidence, there's a fair bit to capture and try and interpret and understand what it means and how can it tell the story of how this crash happened. So we're going to start with the most common, which is tyre marks. The only thing touching the road from your vehicle generally is the tyres. So they're the first thing that's going to leave a mark on the road when things go wrong. They can leave a number of different types of marks, and that type of mark depends on what the tyre that caused it is doing. Is it locked and sliding? So in other words, is it skidding? Is it rotating and sliding? So the wheel's still turning, but the car may be going sideways, so it's leaving a mark behind. Is the wheel just freewheeling, just rolling on along, not leaving any mark at all? The tyre marks caused by sliding tyres, so that's skidding or rotating and sliding, we call tyre friction marks, or TFMs. So there's the first crash investigating term for you. Tyre friction marks. The different tyre friction marks all have specific characteristics and can tell us, the investigator, what has been happening to that tyre to cause the type of mark you see. So we're going to start with skid marks. Sorry, my other slide's not working. So definitions. And when you're in court and you want to describe a skid mark, these are the ways that you confirm it as a skid mark. So it's a mark made by a tyre that is locked and sliding. They start faint and they get darker as the mark gets longer. They are usually reasonably straight. You won't see them curving off. They generally go straight. They contain longitudinal striations, and that's the important one to remember. Horrible term. What it is marks inside the tyre mark parallel with the skid, and I'll show you a picture in a minute. They're the biggest clue you have a skid. They may also be slightly darker on the outside edges, and what we're talking about here is in this diagram. So the tyre here on the left is a normal tyre. All of the tread face is in contact with the road. What happens when we skid is the weight is transferred. So if you're in a car and you hit the brakes, you feel yourself getting pushed forwards. Your weight is moving forward. So what it does, it transfers more weight onto the front wheels. So the tyre starts over deflecting. You see here the sidewalls are starting to bulge. That tyre is getting squashed as more weight goes onto it. When that happens, it lifts the inside of the tread slightly. So it starts lifting it. It doesn't lift it completely off the road. This diagram exaggerates it, but it just shows what happens. The tyre starts to deform because of the extra weight on it. So now the outside edges of that tyre are carrying the bulk of the weight. So because that's happening, they generate more heat. So they leave a darker mark. So the outside edges of the skid can be darker because of this over deflection. Just remember that term, over deflection, and what it means. because the same applies if you overload a vehicle or you have low tyre pressure. The tyre over deflects, the sidewalls squash out. And the skid mark. So this here, an example of a skid mark. We can see it's running straight. There's not so much darkness on the outside compared to the inside, so yeah, not so important. But the key there is these striations. You see the lines in that skid mark. Those are the longitudinal striations or the parallel marks, and they tell you that that tyre is locked and sliding, and it's just leaving those nice straight lines. It's another example of a skid. This one is slightly curved, and all that means is if you look at this road, it slopes downhill to the inside of the corner. That vehicle's skidding and gravity is trying to pull it down that hill. So it pulls the front of the car down the slope. So it's not from steering. When you're skidding, you have no steering. It's purely gravity pulling it downhill. In terms of characteristics, looking here, it starts very faint. It's quite hard to see exactly where that skid starts. We've got some faint lines there, and it gets darker as it goes along. It's getting darker because it's building up heat. So the tyre first starts to skid. The longer it skids, the hotter it gets, the darker the mark becomes. So we see a faint beginning and it progressively getting darker. We can see some striations. We see lines running parallel to the tyre mark. So again, compelling evidence that that is a skid mark caused by a locked and sliding tyre. We know in that case, because that vehicle is skidding, the driver has no steering, but we also know the driver has braked. So the driver is alert, has applied the brakes, and the brakes in the vehicle are operating correctly because they caused the car to skid. So you've instantly ruled out driver being asleep, mechanical fault with the brakes, just from that skid mark evidence alone. Towards the end of this course, we will teach you how to determine the speed from the length of those skid marks. So by measuring how long the skid mark is, you'll be able to calculate the vehicle speed. So that's in the maths part of this training, and it's a really handy tool. Another skid mark, again, faint at the start. This one here shows the darker outside edges really well. So the weights come onto that vehicle, over deflection of the tyre, the outside edges are carrying it. We have striation marks. So we can see here the skid marks heading straight along that road and damaged fence. So the vehicle's actually skidded and crashed through the fence. This one's a little bit different. We've got this gap here. So the skid is going along nice and dark, then it disappears, then it starts again. Along here, it's going nice and dark, it gets fainter, then it gets dark again. What can cause that? The driver momentarily taking his foot off the brake, or something's changed in the road. And in this case, the road has a very slight dip. So as the vehicle's been skidding, the road dip, actually the vehicle tyre leaves the ground for a short time. When it leaves the ground, it's not skidding, it doesn't leave a mark, and it's touched the ground again at the other side of the dip. So in this case, it's still a continuous skid. There's just that slight dip in the road where the tyre has left the ground. And on this side, the tyre hasn't left the ground completely, but a lot of the weight has come off it as the road's dipped down, hence the mark getting lighter. So again, still a skid mark. It's got the nice characteristics. Describing that one in court, it was straight, it had parallel striations, the outside edges were slightly darker than the inside, and the start was faint. It got darker as it progressed. Nice clinical definition of a skid mark. So from that, we know that the driver had braked hard enough to lock the wheels, causing them to slide. Again, what have you done there? You've proved the vehicle's brakes are working, and you proved the driver was awake because he has applied the brakes, just from the physical evidence of a simple skid mark. This picture, another skid. but it's how skids can look on a wet road. So this is a wet road. This here is the skid mark. We have striations. And what happens on a wet road when the car skids, the tyres are sliding, they generate heat, and it actually boils the water under the tyre, so it becomes like a steam cleaner. And what that is happening there is the skid is cleaning grime and dirt off the road surface. So you've got a clean bit of road where the skid happened and just the normal dirty road where it didn't happen. That is pretty fragile evidence. If you arrive at the scene more than a few minutes after it's happened, you're unlikely to see them. If it continues to rain, the rain will hide it. It raises a good point that if you attend a crash on a wet road, go back on the next fine day and see what evidence is now visible. Even though this has left a clean white skid, on a dry road, you may see a faint rubber mark, a faint skid mark left by the vehicle. So always check the scene, particularly for wet scenes, on a fine day, and even with different lighting. So go when it's a nice sunny day, different types of lighting, looking from different angles, you will see more evidence come out. This one is using the evidence on your tyre mark to link it to the tyre that caused the skid. So just note the striations. We have 5 distinct striations in the skid mark. And if we look at the tyre, we have 5 distinct tread pattern bands. So the shape, spacing of the striations, we can match it up to the tyre that caused it. So we look at the vehicles and look for the tyre that has tread patterns that will match up to the skid mark. Can be a good way to help prove which vehicle left the marks at a scene, just using a little bit of physical evidence and interpretation, matching to your tyres. Just remember that the striation marks are caused by the tread pattern. So if you look at those, let's say, look at the tread pattern, you see those sort of lines of the blocks, they correlate or match the striations. Some characteristics. I won't dwell on this because I have a chart further into the presentation that covers them, and you also have that chart in the booklet that goes with the course. But just remember, these are the things that you want to cover off evidentially. That a skid mark is relatively straight. They can be very long. You may see a skid in excess of 100 meters long. What that would indicate is a very high speed, or perhaps a braking fault where only one of the tyres is able to lock and the other ones are doing no braking. So the vehicle's braking efficiency is bad. The number of marks varies. Often you'll see 4, but it's more common to see 2. Vehicles now are engineered so that the front wheels will lock, but the rear won't. By the rear wheels being able to rotate, it maintains stability, so it lets the car carry on straight. So often engineers build in braking systems that don't lock the rear wheels. So you may definitely see 2. If you see 2 skid marks, use it as a flag to consider having a mechanic test the brakes of the vehicle.
Нужно эти характеристики использовать для того, чтобы определить вот механику действия автотранспортного средства во время торможения. Эти следы заносов нам помогают в этом.
Yeah. So I've lost my page. And just remember, start faint, get darker as they go along. Because of weight shift, the weight going forward, more weight on the front wheels will leave a darker skid than the rear wheels if they lock up. So I'll show you this chart shortly that summarizes that. Where are we going, Gertie? There we go. Another handy skid mark, Crookmarks or crooks. These aren't criminals. These are how we describe skids that suddenly deviate, so suddenly change direction, like these ones here. What they tell us is this vehicle traveling into the screen has been skidding, and something has come from the right and hit it, causing it to suddenly deviate that way there, across to the left. So they're a really good way to place the front wheels of the vehicle at that moment of impact. So this vehicle's been skidding happily straight, impact's happened, and it's pushed the vehicle off course. We know now that the front wheels of this car were right there at the moment it was struck. Just remember, the front of the car sticks out in front of the wheels. So looking at this vehicle here, there's the wheels, the front of the car's out here. But you can then establish exactly where the front of your vehicle was when it was struck. This one is interesting because we have two other marks coming off, and that's from the rear wheel. So as the front's kicked around anti-clockwise to the left, the rear of the car has swung out to the right and left the tyre marks there. So we've fully placed that car on the scene just because of the way those tyre marks had deviated because of the Crookmarks. Now we'll talk about yaw marks. This is a different type of mark. It is still a tyre friction mark, but it's one made by a tyre that is rotating and sliding. So it's still turning while the vehicle is sliding. These are always curved, not like a skid mark that's usually straight. These things are definitely and visibly curved. They have oblique or diagonal striation marks, so they're not parallel to the mark anymore, they run across it. They're angular to the tyre mark itself. And they are darker on the outside than on the inside. When we talked about braking, we talked about weight shift, pushing weight forward. You think about driving around a corner, you feel yourself getting pushed to the outside of the corner. So there's more weight going onto the outside edge of the tyre, lifting the inside. They look like that. So as they instantly look a bit different to skid marks. They're all curved. So what we're seeing here is a vehicle that's sliding through a curved path into that tree. I don't know if you have a problem with drifters in your country. In New Zealand, we have young men with powerful cars who deliberately make their cars slide sideways, copying the movies like Fast and Furious and Tokyo Drift and all of that sort of thing, where there's competitions to see who can slide their car the best. And it's these sort of marks that behaviour, that drifting leaves behind. There's how the striation marks look. So instead of being parallel, they're now running diagonal or obliquely to the tyre mark. So the tyre mark's running up here, our striations run across it. And that's your big clue. You'll see these often on tar sealed surfaces, usually the white paint. If you have road paint, painted markings on your road, have a look on the paint. It shows these striations up very well. There are times when you won't see the striations. This is the case on a gravel road. Striations weren't visible because of the road surface. So what we did was actually put little cones on all the tyre marks we could see and step back. And the minute you do that, you can see that all of these marks are curved. So it tells us the vehicle was in a yaw. It was sliding, getting sideways as it came down the road there. So sometimes you won't have that striation evidence for yaw marks. Step back and take a look at the whole picture. Do you see that curved process happening? Then you know you have a yaw situation. The thing to remember with yaws, they are caused by steering. It is a deliberate steering action that causes a vehicle to go into a yaw. So from that, it tells you that one, the driver is alert because the driver has made the steering input. And the second thing it tells you is they're trying to turn the vehicle when they're going too fast to be able to make that turn. So these often happen on bends, typically coming out of a corner. If someone tries to corner a vehicle way too fast, the friction between the tyres is not enough to hold the car in its lane, it will develop this yaw and slide out on the corner. So common on curved roadway crashes. Have a look for the yaw marks. They're not as prominent as skid marks. They don't generate that heat like a locked and sliding wheel generates a lot of heat and smoke. These marks don't generate quite so much heat, so they're not as dark. The other tyre friction mark we want to talk about is an acceleration scuff. Use a drag racing phrase, a burnout. The car is sitting still. It's done by a powerful engine. They push the accelerator to the floor, it starts the wheels spinning, and the wheels will spin and the vehicle will start moving and gradually pick up speed. They can look a lot like a skid mark. We see our striations. So the tread pattern, because the wheel is spinning and it's going straight, causes our striations. But the start is very defined. It doesn't start faintly. It starts suddenly, abruptly, and there's generally molten tar, bits of tyre rubber at the start. Opposite to a skid, they fade as the mark gets longer. So as the wheels are spinning and the car is picking up speed, eventually the car gets up to the speed that matches how fast the tyres are spinning. So the spinning stops and the car is gathered all at speed, which is what's happened here. They've faded away. So important at a crash scene, if you arrive and see these marks, you may initially think they're a skid mark. Have a good close look at the start. It may be they're actually acceleration scuffs going the other way. So in this case, it's not a skid coming towards us. It's a vehicle accelerating, going away. Two wheels like that, yeah, powerful engine to do it. Front wheel drive cars do it quite easily, but it's usually only one wheel, because when they accelerate off, opposite to braking, the weight is shifted to the rear of the car. The weight comes off the front wheels, so they're able to spin easier. So if you've been at traffic lights and someone's accelerated away quickly in a front wheel drive car, you'll hear that squeal as the tyres spin. And it's exactly that, an acceleration scuff. The last one we want to talk about is a flat tyre mark. Now, these ones are caused by a tyre that's underinflated or is grossly overloaded. And what happens is that overdeflection happens, and it overdeflects enough that the actual tyre becomes wobbly and doesn't hold its shape. And we get these weird scalloped edges. They're not nice and uniform. You look at that, they're quite irregular, quite wobbly. And it's because that tyre is so overdeflected, the tyre can't keep its shape. So it starts to wobble around and the edges of the tyre actually contact the road. The mark is left by heat buildup. These tyres get extremely hot because they've been squashed and they're still being driven on. And eventually they get that hot that the rubber breaks down and the tyre will fail. So if you're heading to a crash and you see this mark, just be aware, if it stops at your crash scene, you may have had a vehicle that was being driven on with an underinflated or overloaded tyre. So not hugely common, but when you see it, you'll know it. And as I say, use it as a little sort of red light. Perhaps the vehicle in this crash has an overloaded tyre. So yeah, something to look for next time you're travelling to a crash scene. The last tyre mark I want to talk about is not a friction mark. It's called an imprint. So it's made by a tyre that is freely rolling. And basically, if it rolls across anything soft, be it sand, dirt, molten tar, it will leave an imprint or a pattern of its tread pattern behind. So you could take a plaster cast of that, take a mold of the tyre print. Let's say what it tells you is that the tyre was freewheeling. It can be useful in determining post-impact direction of travel. So cars crash, they separate, and they roll off to their final rest position. If it's rolled off the side of the road through dirt, you may be able to track that vehicle's path using imprints. Particularly helpful if someone moves the car from its original rest position prior to you getting to the scene. So have a look for imprints leading to where the car was actually at rest. That's where they become helpful. This is that chart I was telling you about. What we have here is a list of all the characteristics of different marks and what the driver or what the wheel motion is, what the driver was doing to cause the mark. So for a skid mark, it is locked and sliding. What's the action? The driver has braked. How many will you see? Mostly 4, but often 2, and you sometimes may see 3 or 1. Anything other than 4, think about mechanical inspection to check the brakes are working properly. It describes the how the front tyres are darker, more prominent than the rear. It talks about striations being parallel to the mark. If we come across to the next one, the yaw mark, what's the movement? The tyre is rolling and side slipping, so it's both rotating and sliding. What's the action that causes it? Steering. How many will you see? 2, 1. 1 is quite common. 2, not next common. Then 3. To see all 4 is reasonably rare. It's a full-on slide from the vehicle, but it gives you all the characteristics. So there's the different types of marks there we've talked about, and the definitions, what they look like, what they mean in terms of what the driver did and what the tyre is doing. So a handy reference chart. When you're doing this stuff becomes second knowledge. You don't need the chart. It's all filed away in your brain. You know exactly what you're looking at, exactly how to describe it. But initially, as you're still learning what the marks are, this is a handy reference chart and a handy way to help you describe the mark to satisfy the courts evidentially that you've identified the mark correctly. All right, how's our time looking? Still plenty. Right, I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute stretch before I start on the next set of marks. So we're doing some reasonably intense stuff here. So take a quick 5 minutes. If I see you back here at 10 past 12, I'll tell you what, scrub that. We have a coffee break scheduled in 10 minutes time. So we'll just keep going for 10 minutes. Sorry, bear with me. Okay. We'll talk about gouge and scrape marks before we have coffee. So a couple of definitions. A gouge, it is a deep penetration of the road surface. So it usually involves the surface, the tar, the stones being ripped out so that you can see the dirt underlying the road. Where it's important is that it indicates the area of maximum engagement. And we'll talk about that tomorrow when we talk about vehicle movement, vehicle dynamics. But it's a very important point where cars collide, they touch, they engage with each other, and at that maximum engagement, the cars are pushed into each other as much as they can, and they start forcing the cars themselves down into the road. And it's at that point where the gouges are happening. So a gouge can tell you where the vehicles were at the point of maximum engagement, which can be crucial evidence. What is important is if you have a gouge on the roadway, is to look underneath the vehicle and see what part of the vehicle caused it. Because the gouge has ripped out stones and tar, they will be trapped underneath the car in the object that caused it. So it's usually something significant, cross members, steering arms, bolts and things that are sticking down underneath the suspension. But link those to the gouge, and it should place that vehicle on the road right there. The other type of mark is a scrape mark. A scrape mark is a lighter mark that doesn't actually penetrate the road surface. It's if you imagine dragging a steel plate across the road. It's lightly scraping the stones of the road surface, but it's not digging in and carving it up. They can appear sort of a whitish grey. Where they're useful is in telling us how, or the direction post-impact of a vehicle. So crash happens, the fronts of the cars is destroyed, it's all now sitting on the ground. They slide to come to rest, and they will leave scrape marks showing you the path they took to come to rest. So let's find a picture. Right there. Okay, this is that same crash that we first saw, the truck versus silver car suicide. And what we have here is a significant gouge mark. You can see the tar seal surface has been ripped apart, and we can see the dirt and stones that sit under the road. There's a smaller one there and a smaller one there. So what that tells us, at the point that car and truck collided, their maximum engagement happened right here. So that evidence has put this impact clearly in that lane, which is the correct lane for the truck. So we know that the silver car was on the wrong side of the road. In New Zealand, we drive on the left. So this silver car should have been in here. It was across in this lane. We also have some light grey marks here. Those are scrape marks. So what they're doing is showing us where this car travelled off after impact. So it's crossed the centre line, impacted there, and been pushed back across the road. And there's a bit more there. Same crash scene again, scrape marks from the truck. So those gouges were up there. The silver car has been pushed back across there. The truck is carried on, and some of the components that was damaged have been dragging down the road, causing scrape marks. So we've helped identify the post-impact direction of travel of the truck. We also have tyre marks supporting that. So that physical evidence tells us how the vehicle's moved after impact. This case here, same again, scrape marks here showing that vehicle moving that way after impact. So really simple evidence to see, but very important in terms of telling us how vehicles have moved post-impact. A little bit on fluids. If you think about fluids in a vehicle, we have gasoline, we have engine oil, we have windscreen washer water, we have radiator full of water, we have brake reservoirs full of brake fluids, and batteries full of acid. They're all liquids. In a crash, often the vessel or container those liquids is in is destroyed. So we can get water or liquids leaking from the vehicle. For radiator water, that's under pressure when the car is hot, or the engine is hot. So if the radiator is punctured, that water will violently squirt out, and it can squirt down onto the road and give you a, if you imagine squirting a garden hose straight down, the water goes down and splatters out, and you get a definite mark. So that can be helpful in giving you information as to where the actual impact occurred. So we call that spatter under pressure. We have dribble, which is just water dribbling out of a vehicle from non-pressurized containers. So like the windscreen wiper bottle, if that's broken, water will just pour out of that. If the car's still sliding to rest after impact, that water can leave you a trail, so a dribble trail. You'll get puddles. Vehicles had impact, come to rest, the fluid just drains out and it can form puddles under the vehicle. If it's parked on a slope, you'll see runoffs, that water's drained off down the slope. If it's come to rest on the dirt beside the road, you may get water soaking into the dirt. And the other thing you can see is as other vehicles drive through the scene, they will track the water through. But we've got a picture here showing Another head-on crash on that same piece of road as our suicide. Just for your information, since there was 3 crashes in 3 months that took 11 lives. There's now a barrier down this highway. It's been there for 20 years. We haven't had a fatal crash on that piece of road since the barrier went in. So that's just an example of how the information gathered through the crash investigation process drove the council to put in that wire barrier. So the barrier has been hit over 300 times. So there's potentially 300 head-on crashes that would have occurred if that barrier wasn't in that roadway. But back to topic, here we see vehicle fluid running off. So that's runoff down the slope of the road as the vehicles have come to rest after impact. And I think before we do this, we will now take a 15-minute coffee break. So if we come back at 12:30, we will run through the last part before finishing up for the day. So go and enjoy 15 minutes off with a cup of coffee or tea or whatever. I'm going to do the same, and I'll see you in 15 minutes. See you 12:30.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Mark. Mark, just one request. Please prepare this movie with a police car slowing down and doing marks on the road, just to show how it works, okay? See you 12:30.
What's the time for you, Arthur? Early morning?
7:30.
Ah, you're doing well. Okay. We have plenty of time. We'll go 3 more minutes and we'll start, because we have plenty of time.
Марк, здравствуйте. Могу вам задать вопрос?
Meanwhile, can I ask a question? Hello to everyone.
Yep.
Вот в каком отделе и на какой должности вы работали?
What was your position and what was the division in the police office when you worked?
Yeah, so I was inspector, which is same as, I guess, captain/major in the military. I worked for the road policing branch of New Zealand Police. So in New Zealand Police, we have general duties, road policing, and criminal investigation bureau. So 3 main branches, and I was in the road policing branch.
А вот сотрудник, который рассматривает...
And the staff who is investigating the road crash, and the person who goes to the crash scene, are these the same officers or they might be different?
Different. We have our general duties and general road policing staff attend the crash. If it's a fatal crash, they call the serious crash unit. So we have specialized crash investigators spread across the country, and they attend every fatal or serious crash, mainly fatal, and they complete the report and often will do the prosecution although generally they give the report to the criminal investigation branch who do the prosecution. I'm going to find something on that.
Ясно. Спасибо большое за это.
It's clear. Thank you very much.
Yeah, if I can jump in and add something from a Polish perspective, answering the question about my rank. My rank was younger inspector, but it says nothing. But in the military, I was lieutenant colonel. So coming back to the question, who is dealing with road crashes? Of course, at the beginning, the group who is available on the road is going to the road crash, and the situation depends on the city, because in big cities like Warsaw, Łódź, Wrocław, and etc., we have special teams. We call them kind of how to call it correctly in English, crash response team, something like that. And those are teams well educated and well equipped with special vehicles, when they have equipment to secure the crash scene and to investigate. In small cities, ordinary traffic police officers, they are dealing with road crashes, but not fully, I would say, because whenever it is a fatal crash, the special team in small cities, a special team of criminal police is going to help traffic police officers to secure the crash scene and to look for some evidences. So it depends on the city. In big cities, there is this crash response team, and they do everything with their road crash. And in small cities, ordinarily traffic police officers, but they are supported by police officers from criminal office, because they are a bit more well experienced, and they have a bit more knowledge about investigations. This is the situation in Poland. Okay, Mark.
Ясно, спасибо.
I think, yeah, always. We
Thank
can
you
go
very
ahead.
much. Да, Марк, мы теперь можем.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Yeah. I think every country has, even the police, if it's not a military force, the rank structure replicates or mimics sort of the military hierarchical approach. And yeah, in New Zealand, we have 12 police districts. So each of them is run by a district commander, who is basically rank of colonel, and they control their district but report to headquarters for the national direction. And each district for us has a serious crash unit. So that might be a team of 5 members who will respond to all the fatal crashes in that district. So they run a roster and have 24/7 coverage, so they're available all the time. New Zealand, we basically get 1 fatal crash per day somewhere in the country, and about 9 serious injury crashes. So they are busy staff. So, yeah. Well, good. Hey, before we wrap up,
Mark, one thing I want to add, because I forgot to mention that it's not the same team which is investigating and dealing with road crash at the scene, a crash scene. Those are not the same people in Poland. because those who are collecting evidences, they collect and prepare all documents and send back to the investigators. So they are not the same people. And investigators are well trained, well experienced, and usually they are high-ranked police officers, mainly. Of course, when they start doing this job, maybe they might be in the rank of sergeants, something like that, but then they become officers, so high-rank officers. So this is how it works. Okay, I'm not going to interrupt you.
You can, it's fine. No problem. All right, before we go through the last 4 slides in the presentation, Arthur reminded me of a video I have from a police training day here in Wellington. And it's a good one to watch for how a skid happens with a vehicle. So I'm going to play it once all the way through, and then we'll go back and stop it piece by piece and explain what is happening to the vehicle at the Tyre road interface, where the tread touches the road, and what you're feeling inside the car. So can you see that screen okay, Arthur? The picture of the police car? Yeah, good. Okay, we hit play. Alrighty, so that was a skid. This was a training day, so this police vehicle usually has anti-lock braking, ABS brakes, so it doesn't lock the wheels. It was disabled for this training. So what we're going to do is go through it now and step by step and just sort of highlight what we were talking about earlier. And hopefully I can pause it at the right time. So it's driving along. At that point there, the driver has applied the brakes. So you notice the front of the car started diving down and the back was coming up. So that's that weight shift. Hit the brakes, the car tips forward. So more weight going onto the front wheels. And you see that the front is coming through. So we'll keep going. And the brakes were first applied here, and it's taken through to here for us to start seeing smoke. So the vehicle has been skidding for about ½ meter already before it starts to generate smoke and heat and start to leave the mark on the road. So that's why it starts faintly. It takes time for the heat to generate enough to actually start burning the rubber and melting the tar of the road. So now it's starting to leave a mark. And you can see the smoke's getting thicker as it gets hotter. And there we see the car bounce back up to where it should be. The other thing to notice, the rear wheels didn't lock up. They kept turning. So it's engineered into that vehicle. The back wheels will keep turning if the front lock, and it just keeps it going straight. It gives you stability. So we'll just run through it once more. And you just watch that. I'll let it run all the way, but watch how long it takes from when the tyre stops turning till the smoke starts, and watch the front come down. That weight transfer, push down on the front and lift the back slightly. So that's all the mechanics of a skid happening. From the time the driver pushes the brake pedal, and in this circumstance, he's pushing it really hard. He's basically jumping on and trying to push that pedal through the car to get it to lock its wheels quickly. it takes time for the wheel to stop turning. Then once the wheel stops, it takes time for the heat to build up to start making the smoke and start leaving the mark. So what that means is every skid mark that you see at a scene, there's already been a short amount of braking before the visible tyre mark starts. And that's important when we come to do the mathematics on calculating speed. What we calculate is the minimum speed because we've ignored the part of the braking we can't see, the stuff that's happened when the tyre's locked but hasn't started leaving the mark. So we'll deal with that when we do the maths. And I have another one somewhere. I'll just get rid of that. Where is it? Ugh, never find things when you need to. This is another skid. Again, a different bit of training, but same sort of circumstance. Now in this case, the back wheels have locked as well. And you can see what happens to the car. The back is starting to come around. It's starting to go sideways. Because all four wheels is locked, it's lost that stability, that directional control. But we see the same things happening when the brakes are first applied. Let's take it back. So watch the front of the vehicle dive, bit of braking, then the smoke. Slightly older vehicle, not quite so advanced as the new one. But it just shows the importance of having those rear wheels able to turn and keep the vehicle straight. So it gives you that control. See, New Zealand are busy. They have time to go and play. Lucky. Alrighty. So, yeah, just a couple of quick films to show you what the mechanics of braking.
Mark, yeah, I know that I promised not interrupting you, but you know,
yeah, you did.
Since I'm talkative, I cannot keep myself not interrupting. The question is, who is paying for the tires doing this kind of training? Because I haven't had a chance in Poland being even a crash investigator and being police officer for more than 20 years to attend this kind of training, because there always was the question, who is going to pay for the tires, because they will be damaged, because of course it's obvious when you hit the brakes like that without this anti-blocking system, the tire in that moment will be flat. So it's useless in the future. So how you could afford this?
We had a really good relationship with our police tyre supplier. So the police cars in New Zealand, we change tyres when they get down to 5mm tread. So the tyres are only half worn, and the tyre fitter holds on to them. So we would just go to our local agent and say, we've got some training coming up. Can you fit some tyres to rims for us? So they were old police tyres that were stored by the tyre dealer. So, and they fitted them free of charge, just doing us a favour.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you act with the saying, because there is a saying that money doesn't give you happiness, but spending money will give you happiness. So, of course, it's important to have budget on such things like this. Just one remark: could you stop sharing the screen for a while, because I want to come back to the question how we deal with road crashes, and I found on police website the information that they bought. Can you see the police cars? Mark, can you see the police cars? Yeah, okay. Yep. Those are those ambulances. They call it a crash scene ambulance. And the ambulance, as you can see, is well equipped. They are the newest ones. So it wasn't like that 10 or 15 years ago, because when I was a traffic police officer, I couldn't use this kind of cars because we didn't have them. And why we have them nowadays, you will see it shortly. And you see, it's like in the office, you can write reports, you can measure something. So there is a printer, something like that. So it looks perfect. There is additional light acting during the night. There is the LED sign, the accident or crash. But it was bought from the EU funds. So as I told you, even me, I was lucky because we got a lot of possibilities to become more aware about the situation, and we get a lot of money to improve also the police action. So this is how it works.
Looks good.
Yeah. Okay, Mark.
Yeah, nice.
Now I'm muted.
No worries. I'll get my screen back. Okay. The last thing I want to quickly talk about is how to mark evidence at the scene. So you get to a scene, taking good notes, taking photographs is really important. And it's important to photograph the scene in its raw state as you find it when you arrive. Once you've done that, you want to mark the evidence so that you can move the evidence out of the way, get traffic flowing, but take your measurements from the marks you make. So what we recommend for a vehicle, I'll get my laser back, mark the corners, so the 4 corners, and mark where the tyres are. And what we suggest is paint down the side of the tyre and out onto the road. That way, you've got a mark on the tyre that shows you where the contact patch or where that tyre was touching the road in its final rest position. If the vehicle has skidded to rest, you will see the flat spot where the tread has been worn out from the skidding. So it's just a handy way to make it quicker to find that flat spot on your tyre. Marking skid marks. Use paint spots down the middle of the mark. So if that's a tyre mark there, paint spot at the end, and every metre, 2 metres, put another spot down the middle of the mark. I used to draw a box around the start with a little arrow and then put spots and do a box around the end. And I went to a scene and I marked it up this way, and 2 days later returned to the scene just to have a look in different light, and I could see extra skid mark that I couldn't see on the day. So I put paint spots on it, but then got questioned in court as to why I had added more length to the skid mark, that I was falsifying evidence because I had already drawn this box showing the start. So I learned the hard way by using spots. If you go back another day, you can simply add more spots, no problem with it. So use that method for skid marks, for scrape marks, same thing. Any mark that's long at your scene, dots along it. Gives you a reference point to measure to. And when you take photographs, it also shows up the evidence that you're talking about, that the spots show up in your photos. The last bit there is marking a body. Don't do like American crime TV and do the outline around the body. We are discreet. A single line for the feet, another one for the head with a little arrow showing where the head is. This is really important. Say it's a child pedestrian run over outside the family home. The family doesn't want to go out every day and see the outline of their child painted on the road. So these marks here are a lot more discreet. The family have no idea what they mean, but you as the investigator know exactly what those marks signify. And there's just a quick example of scene marking. So tyre marks, dots along it, scrape mark, dots along it, and just circle the gouges. This one here, we have a curved scrape mark, so we just have dots placed upon it. Another scrape mark, dot at each end. And here you can see how we mark the vehicle. So there's a corner of the vehicle there. We've painted down the tyre and onto the road. So it shows where that tyre was touching the road. Also, in here we have exhibit labels. So we used to carry a stack of labels, numbers up to 20 and alphabet for English alphabet A to Z, so 26 letters. And we could place those on the exhibit. So when we were writing our report, we could refer to scrape mark exhibit 6, have the photograph, you knew exactly what one we were talking about. It made it easy to link the photographs to the report, to the narrative. And that is about that. Looking at time. Any questions on that? And with questions, if you think of one later, jot it down and we can answer them tomorrow as well before we start. So no panic for questions now. And I'll stop sharing. Cool. That was a lot of talking. Awesome. So, any questions?
Есть, есть вопросы. Слышите, да? Меня?
If you can hear me, I have a question.
Yeah.
Слышно? Я тоже такой вопрос. Вот, когда
I have
на
a
месте
question.
происшествия
In the place of crash,
эксперты,
experts, do they visit
такой на тяжкие дорожно-транспортные происшествия?
to the severe
Также
crashes,
выезжают ли
whether
одновременно
at the same time
дорожные владельцы этих дорог,
owners of the roads come to the place of crash in addition to the traffic police? Is it practiced in your countries?
Okay. In New Zealand, the owners of the road come the following day. We keep them away from the crash scene itself while we do our evidence collection. The owners of the road do provide traffic control and scene protection for us, but then we do a second visit with the owner and the engineer and take them through the crash event and the exhibits and evidence that was left, but they don't come into the scene.
Okay, I can answer this question from my perspective, because I know it from the road authority. Since I was after I retired, I become a road authority member. So I know it from both perspectives, and still being in the police, we decided that in every fatal crash, there should be a kind of commission that will go to the crash scene to assess the situation. So answering strictly the question, no. On the day of the crash, severe crash or the fatal crash, there is no road authority. Of course, maybe if it's a motorway, they are coming just to secure the scene on motorways, not on a rural roads at all. So answering the question, no, they don't attend the crash scene, but according to our agreement between police from national level to the road authorities in every city in the country, we are obliged to meet together as a commission within 5 days after the fatal crash to check out if any kind of engineering issue could influence the accident, and which is not a part of course, of the investigation, but only to see also if there is a possibility to change something to avoid the crash in the future. So it works like that. It's just a gentleman agreement between police and the road authority that within 5 days they coming together and they see the crash scene, and they decide if there is something that might be changed by a road authority, not by police, of course, to avoid accidents in the future. And I was attending as a road authority member those commissions while I was working for City Hall in Warsaw.
Awesome.
Another question?
Yeah.
Вот у меня такой вопрос касательно, который относится к законодательству вашей страны. Да? Допустим, возьмем Новую Зеландию.
I have the question about legislation in your countries. The person who is faulty of the crash, what are the penalties that can be applied to such person who is in charge or who is faulty of the crash, according to your legislation?
Okay, I'll go first, Arthur. In New Zealand, it depends on how serious the injuries are and how bad the driving was. So we have a charge called careless driving, which is basically when a driver makes a mistake and they kill someone, they can go to prison for up to 2 years. There is a $4,500 NZ dollar fine, which is about 2,000 US, and they lose their license for 12 months. From there, it escalates. Dangerous driving, similar prison. Sorry, the prison for careless was 6 months. For dangerous driving, and reckless driving, it's 2 years prison, $4,500 fine, and minimum 12 months loss of license. But generally, what happens in New Zealand, if you lose your license for 12 months, you have to reapply and go through the whole getting your license process again. And if there's alcohol involved, it escalates it as well. So the prison term and the loss of license term increases. So it all depends on how bad the crash is. If it's a deliberate act and the person is charged with murder or homicide, they can get life in prison. Manslaughter, again, is like below homicide or murder, but we have had charges of manslaughter for traffic crashes, and that involves anything up to 10 years in prison. Indefinite loss of license, so they lose their license forever. And if the court wants, they can impose a fine, but generally it's imprisonment. So yeah, it depends on how bad the driving was, the extent of the injuries or fatalities, and the graduated scale. Arthur.
Okay, so of course in Poland is quite. Yeah. Would you like to hear how the situation looks like in Poland? Yeah. Okay, so the situation in Poland is quite similar to New Zealand, because the penalty depends on the severity of the crash. Of course, if there are no injuries, we call it collision, and it goes with this penal code, which is much lower. It's an infringement. We call them then infringement. And you can be fined. The fines increased from the 1st January of this year. Normally, the highest fine in Poland till end of December 2021 was 500 zlotys, which is more or less $120 US. It wasn't much. Nowadays, from the 1st of January 2022, the highest fine for collision is 5,000 Polish zlotys, which is 1,200. So the situation has changed. But coming back to crashes, when there is a serious injury, you might be sentenced till 3 years imprisonment. And when it's a fatal casualty, the imprisonment might be extended to 8 years. And of course, there are some other circumstances like alcohol, drugs, and then it will be extended to 12 years. And you can lose your driving license for accident, for crash, from 1 year to 10 years. And of course, if you use alcohol during driving and causing a fatal crash, your driving license might be suspended for all your life. So if it's only infringement, a kind of collision, you can lose your driving license from 6 months to 3 months. 3 years, sorry, 6 months to 3 years. This is more or less the situation in Poland.
Можно, да, вопрос один? Слышно меня?
There is one more question.
Cool.
Вот ранее вы привели статистику, где вот показывается, да, что
Earlier you showed the statistics that New Zealand has twice as less fatal crashes in New Zealand. Which activities and which measures are taken, or outreach activities among the drivers, among the population you are taking in order to achieve such reduction of crashes in your country?
Okay. The biggest change was when New Zealand government adopted the safe system approach to road safety. So it meant policing was tasked and funded to deliver specific road policing or traffic enforcement, and also extra budget given to our transport agency who builds the roads to put in safety measures. So putting in the barrier ropes, changing intersections, making them safer. So a mixture of police activity and network improvements is what did it. Plus we had a whole lot of advertising. We changed our driver's license process a little bit. It used to be very easy to get a license in New Zealand. Now it takes 2 years for a new person to go from no license to having their full license. So we made that a lot more complicated, a lot higher standard. Those are the main ones: better enforcement and better, safer networks. It was expensive. I do work with the agency now, and we are spending $11 billion on.
А вот какой орган выдает водительское удостоверение у вас?
Which authority is issuing driver's license in your country?
The New Zealand Transport Agency. So it's like a bit like the Ministry of Transport, but it's a separate agency. Police don't issue licenses. It's the transport agency. Police take them away.
То есть на выдачу водительских удостоверений полиция никак...
That means that police doesn't have any impact on issuing licenses, right?
No.
It doesn't play any role.
No. No. Their role is in taking...
Аналогичный вопрос к Артуру, если можно, пожалуйста.
And Arthur, if possible in your country, in Poland, can you also answer the question?
Yeah, about increasing road safety. First of all, I think that, of course, as I'm telling you all the time that we take advantage of having EU money, we built a lot of roads, good roads, a lot of motorways, expressways. So the infrastructure improvement for sure. And the second thing, it was to start this, we call it automatic speed enforcement agency. We bought a lot of speed cameras, which are measuring the speed without the police officers. And last year they bought more than 400 new ones. So we will have a lot of them. So the system is growing and people are slowing down. But it wasn't also like that. And the problem was that the tickets, as I already mentioned, they weren't growing from 1999 in Poland. So from 1999, it was 500 zlotys. At that time, in 1999, it was a huge amount of money. People were suffering very much when they were caught by police and they got a ticket 500 zlotys, which is $120 more or less. But nowadays, for them, it was just like that to pay $120, 500 Polish zlotys. But the situation has changed from the 1st of January. And now, believe me, because I'm a road user, I am driving each day my car within the city in Warsaw. People has changed their behavior. They are driving really slowly because they know that overspeeding in a built area more than 50 kilometers per hour nowadays, it will be 3,500 Polish zlotys, which is 7 times more than it was in December. 3,500 is average salary in Poland because the lowest salary in Poland is 2,000 netto. So can you imagine? So for the people from the lowest salary level, it's almost 2 salaries to overspeed in a built area of 100 with 100 kilometers. Also, I think that big influence on road safety had the legislation that when you overspeed in a built area more than 50 kilometers per hour, your driving license will be suspended immediately by police officer for 3 months, and you are not allowed to drive within 3 months. If you are caught driving within that period, your suspension will be extended to 6 months. And when you still are driving a car and you will be caught by police, then your driving license will be withdrawn for maybe not for entire life, but you have to pass the exam again. Normally, after 3 months, you go to the office and you say, okay, 3 months passed, please give back my driving license. And they will give back the driving license. In Poland, local authorities are issuing the driving licenses. Of course, they are supervised by Ministry of Road? How to say in English? Transport. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Ministry of Transport. So they are supervised by Ministry of Transport, by local authorities. And more or less, like Mark mentioned, we as a police, we don't have any influence on issuing driving licenses, but we have also on withdrawing driving licenses. Hope I covered your question. Any more? Do not hesitate.
Еще один вопрос. Можно, да? Касательно дорожной
question
инфраструктуры.
regarding road infrastructure.
У вас, например, в Польше или Новой Зеландии
either in Poland or New Zealand, do they practice road audit or road safety audit in terms of roads and other road infrastructure? As well as when you investigate a road crash, do you consider it as a separate step of investigation conducting a road safety audit?
Yeah. So in New Zealand, when the police crash investigator meets with the road safety engineer from the transport agency, that engineer does a safety audit. It's also part of every new road construction. A full safety audit is completed first when the road is first planned, so an audit on the paper plan, and then there's ongoing audits during construction. We also have a national ongoing audit of all of the highway network. So we have vehicles just travelling the road network with engineers conducting safety audits throughout the year. So every bit of road network is being inspected annually, and it all goes into a big computer database which they use to plan maintenance from. So any issues that pop up in the audit get flagged for attention. So it's yeah, very active. It hasn't always been that way. That sort of came about again when the government decided to get serious about road safety, took on this new strategy, the safe system approach, and said to the network builder, keep an eye on your roads, make them safer. So they had to start their audit. So yes, definitely happens in New Zealand.
In Poland, the situation looks more or less the same as in New Zealand, but mainly on the main roads. It's according to the law that they have to audit the roads, but it becomes more and more, maybe it's not a good word, popular, but how to say, done by on a daily basis. Because I know it from my experience being a member of a road authority. We in Warsaw, especially in Warsaw, we decided that after each year, all the crash scenes with fatal casualty were inspected, audited by experts, and we paid a lot of money. But this is what I told you. Everything is, of course, about money, because Warsaw as a capital city is in a good position because a lot of people are living in Warsaw, so a lot of taxes, and they can afford those audits. In small cities, it's not the same situation at all. So they don't do this on a daily basis. In Warsaw, after each year, the mayor decided, okay, we will audit all the crash scenes, fatal crash scenes, just to find out what we can improve to make our city safer. So of course we do audits, they are more and more popular, and believe me, sometimes when the road or the intersection is quite old, we have a lot of remarks from auditors, and even if the road is quite new, believe me that those how to say, people who are designing road designers are very, how to say, inventive. They create such crazy things that it's unbelievable that people who are dealing with safety in a kind of way, they are inventing some things. So the audit is sometimes very important. And of course, according to the Polish law, when you introduce new, how to say, road situation, after a few days, you have to go and to check if everything is going on properly. It's not an audit, but it's a how to say, it's a task for road authority. Firstly, to introduce new how to say, help me, Mark, how to say in English correctly that you. New traffic rules. How to say?
New regulations, new laws.
Yeah, in the let's say in the intersection, you are obliged as a road authority to go there after a few days and to control that everything is going properly. This is how it works.
Yeah. Можно вопрос?
Can I ask a question?
Вот я бы хотел бы спросить господина Марка и Артура, да? Вот такой вопрос. Имеется ли у вас анализ, либо статистика?
Do you have any statistical analysis?
Разница причин возникновение совершения дорожных транспортных происшествий между нашей республикой и вашей республикой?
The similarities or like striking differences between traffic accidents or road crashes in your countries and Kyrgyzstan, if you had any statistical data on crashes in Kyrgyzstan?
Let me see. I'm not sure of what the main crash type or causes for Kyrgyzstan. In New Zealand, we have basically a fatal four. We have excessive speed, we have impaired driving, so drugs, alcohol, we have drivers and motorcyclists not wearing seatbelts and helmets, and we have just generally some careless or poor driving. Fatigue and distraction, like using your cell phone, that's featuring, but speed and alcohol each occur for about a third of our fatal crashes. So most of our focus is on speed and alcohol. They're the ones killing the most of our road users. Then we have, again, using seatbelts and just general driving behavior. So I'm picking, that's probably similar for Kyrgyzstan. I know in Asia, I've worked in Vietnam, alcohol and speed were the big problems there, and the restraints, not wearing seatbelts, not wearing helmets. So I would guess it's similar to, for you, Arta, with Poland. It seems to be a common thing around the world.
Yes, I was looking into Polish statistics, but for sure the first one is the speed. For sure, I can assure you that speed is the main problem. And the second one is I think because it used to be, and I don't think that it has changed, is not giving the way. This is a problem in Poland, not giving away. And the third one is not keeping the right distance between vehicles. And this is why they introduced last year new regulation in Poland that whenever you are driving, you have to keep the right distance between the cars. Yeah. The problem is that it's very hard to keep that distance because the regulation says that you have to keep half of the speed between the half in meters, half of the speed you are traveling. So if you travel with 100, you have to keep at least 50 meters. So, you know, going with a car, especially for not a well-experienced police officer, driver, not police officer. Why I'm talking about police officer. About driver, not experienced driver, is very difficult to measure and to assess the distance. Of course, there are some hints that you can look on the marks on the roads with kilometers, but when there are any, so it's very hard. So yeah, the third one is for sure not keeping the right distance. Alcohol, it's not so problematic. Of course it is, because a lot of people are driving under influence of alcohol, and they stop each year a lot of drivers driving under influence of alcohol, but it's not the biggest problem in Poland. So speed, not giving away, in some years incorrect overtaking, and not keeping the right distance between the vehicles.
I see we have a question, a hand up, and then I'll share my screen and show you something from New Zealand. So,
У меня такой вопрос. В обеих странах, как я знаю, разрешена
In both
тонировка.
countries, as far as I know, it's allowed to have tinted glasses in the car. Whether this shaded or tinted window screens affect safe driving. Because now we are discussing the issue whether we should allow this shaded windows in the car or should not.
Yeah. So New Zealand, we do have tinted windows. We have rules though that the windscreen and the front windows, side windows can't be tinted. So only the rear doors and rear windows. So I will dig out the legislation and share a link. It'll be in English, but that may be useful. So yeah, so driver has to have factory glass, passengers and rear can be tinted, but we have a limit. I think it's 30% darkness. It can't drop any more than 30% of the light. So,
exactly. Yeah. The situation looks the same in Poland. Everything what is, I would say 180%, you have to, you cannot dim the windows. Behind, you can do whatever you want. And I'm not sure because Mark mentioned 30%, it's more or less the same. Maybe it's 25 or 30% of darkness, but for sure, you cannot dim the front windshield and the side windows. Why is it like that? Because some manufacturers, they already dim the windows. The very visible company which makes such kind of dimming is Renault. Whenever you look at the car, you see that the windscreen is slightly violet. It means that it keeps you from the sun shades. So you cannot dim more the windscreen. So more or less like in New Zealand.
Cool. Yeah, it's 35% New Zealand. I just I've shared a link in the chat. It's in English, but it outlines the laws in New Zealand, so it may be helpful. Yeah. I just want to quickly show you some stats for New Zealand. This is stats for 2020. So New Zealand had 320 deaths on the road, 155 drivers, 63 passengers, 11 cyclists, 57 motorcyclists, and 32 pedestrians. The worst one, 151 of those deaths involved alcohol or drugs, so drunk or drug driving. 113 of the 320 involved speeding. 5 deaths with tourists. There's a little bit of a tension here with tourists who usually drive on the right-hand side, causing problems. 61 deaths involving trucks, so big heavy vehicles. 30 deaths involving fatigue, so people falling asleep at the wheel. And 29 distracted or diverted attention, so using the cell phone, dealing with the kids in the back of the car. So those are sort of the main groups that we report on in New Zealand. So yeah, we have a few problems. So again, I can share that link. It will be English, but you may be able to translate it. All of this stuff comes from traffic crash reporting, which is why that reporting is so important. It gives you all of this sort of information. That last website is our Ministry of Transport website, and there is so many statistics in there. It's incredible. You can find out all sorts about what happens in crashes on New Zealand's roads. So, yeah, so if you can find someone who can translate it for you, fantastic. Or I don't know if Google will translate the website, worth a try. Cool.
That's the situation in Poland. This is the crash report from 2020. For 2021 is not available because of the 30 days, what Mark was telling you, because all the crashes from December are still ongoing, so they can influence the statistics, because if the crash happened on the 1st of December, they have 30 days to report that crash. So the data will be, how to say, download on the, probably, it used to be when I was responsible for crash data at the beginning of February. But from 2020 report, you can see I was right. The first place is not giving the right, not giving the way. The second is speed, because it depends on the year. You see 5,700 accidents and speed is 5,500. So it depends on the year. And then is incorrect overtaking, incorrect passing by, incorrect evading in English, going from opposite direction, turning, going back, changing the line. So yeah, those, how to say, causes are mainly the same in your country as in New Zealand. So
yeah, common theme. Awesome.
Because you know, it's not a kind of rocket science. We know that driving a car, you can make similar mistake everywhere. It depends on your behavior, of course. This is why we know exactly what are the four main risk factors, which is speeding, not wearing a seatbelt, helmet, and drink driving, because it's globally how to say, proved that they are the most important risk factors. So this is how it works. Some more questions?
That time is done.
Время, да? А вот организатору такой вопрос. Кроме вот наших коллег, еще участвуют там?
In addition to your colleagues, is anyone else will be participating in this training? This is the question to all the organizers.
Unfortunately, as speakers, only two of us, if I'm correct with your question.
Then, should we wrap up today?
Yeah, I think that we just covered all the topics for today. Thank you very much for participating in that training. Hopefully, we will see in the same group of people tomorrow. And believe me, it will be more and more interesting because it will be a very practical part of the training. So be here tomorrow. And for today, thank you once again. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody who helped to prepare this training. And from my side, see you tomorrow. We can ask Ritu. Ritu, would you like to add something to close the first session? Thank you.
Thank you, the speakers. And the
no problem. Thank you for your time. I know it was lots of talking.
Спасибо, всего доброго.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, all the best.
Yep. See you tomorrow.
До свидания всем.
Rita, thank you. And thank to the speakers. See you tomorrow.
Awesome.
Goodbye. See you tomorrow.